So I'm just going to cover here a small tip actually to help prevent breakages to scopes. And in particular, you can see our gastroscope here, it's 3.3 meters coiled on the scope stand. And we've got our up, down, and left, right. And you should not deflect the scope while it's in this position. Otherwise, you risk breaking the deflecting. One thing here is to remember to use warm water and to run water through the actual stomach tube itself. This will actually help reduce friction as the scope passes through the tube and the esophagus. So the next stage is actually now to make sure that the scope is nice and aligned for actually doing the gastroscope itself. So I'm going to control the control body and actually give the remainder of the scope to Jess. So we can actually, as you can see here, be ready to do the gastroscope itself. And all I want to do is show you here that when we're doing a gastroscope, you must have the logo facing the horse in every instance. There's no default from that. As you can see here, when we're introducing the scope, Jess is actually going to prime and come back with the scope. So actually the tube becomes lubricated inside with a lubrication that we put on until we get down into the esophagus, which we're doing here. And we're going to attach the insufflator, which then helps the esophagus open to actually make it easier for the gastroscope to pass down the stomach. Adjusting the scope, keeping it in the center of the lumen until we reach the entry into the stomach. So having got into the stomach, we're in pretty much an optimum position here. And I tend to, with advice from other vets, tend not to flush at this point. Because as you can see here, the fluid level is pretty low. And what we don't want to do is actually increase that fluid level, which will make it harder for us to get into the pylorus. As you can see here, logo facing the horse in the optimum position, looking at the margo plicatus here, the glandular and the non-glandular. And we're just going to ease around here, the greater curvature. And ease around here. I'm using my little index finger to do a little right, and my up down just to keep it pretty much in a neutral position as we go around the actual the greater curvature. I'm going to follow the horse down here a little bit. And we've got pretty much a perfect view of the lesser curvature. And then I'm just going to and this is where your fluid level comes in, because this is where you've got to trust your technique and actually follow the line that you're on. Going to flush the little end of the scope here, and then we're going to get an optimum view of the pylorus, which is, and you can see I'm using my little left hand right movement here as well as using my deflecting, which can actually bring part of the pylorus in as well. So as we can see here, we're looking at the pylorus. We can actually use an upwards and a downwards movement to see the glandular area here. And actually, I can flush off with my hose lock with my right hand and then manipulate the scope through the controls and by turning my wrist at the same time. Left to go left and right to go right on the scope itself. You don't want to be pulling any sort of excess fluid back through your scope. Turn your suction on, and then over, we can gradually then see that the stomach walls are actually contracting, and you can see that fluid level is rising. And so normally after around 30 to 60 seconds, typically the air is removed from the stomach, and we can actually withdraw the scope back up through the esophagus out of the horse.